Hi everybody, I'm Hector Garcia, CPA and big fan of all things QuickBooks. In this video, I'm going to break down a whole bunch of new features that they added to the new bank feeds or the new bank transaction screen in QuickBooks Online that I absolutely love. I'm also going to update you on all the new things that we added in RightTool, which is an add-on you can add to your browser to complement your QuickBooks workflows. But let me focus on what QuickBooks added. So we're in the banking screen. Here where it says the banking name, you can click on that drop-down menu, and I can choose to show or hide cards that's actually been there for a while there. I just wanted to kind of point out that that button was there where you can show and hide all those cards. But if you hide the cards, which is my preferred way of doing it, so I have more real estate, you're going to have inside of this drop-down menu now a search button, which is really useful when you have a lot of banks, a lot of credit cards to go through, where you can just type the account number, assuming you have the account number as part of the account name, or you can put savings or Amex or payroll, whatever. And depending on how you have these accounts named, you should be able to filter there. So that's a super nifty new feature, which is just searching and filtering through the accounts as you swap accounts. The next major feature is this entire screen just responds better. Scrolling up and down, clicking on these drop-down menus, clicking on the additional options, clicking on the transaction itself to open up these options. All these clicks, they feel significantly faster and smoother. Now, this is very anecdotal because I don't have like a scientific way of measuring, because I never measure how fast or how responsive it was before. But I'm telling you, as a person that uses this every single day of his life, this screen is getting better, more responsive, particularly when you batch. So if you were to do a bunch of transactions at once and edit, and these transactions, let's say I were to change the Payee and categorize them through some sort of batching tool, and you click apply and post, this workflow of editing transactions in batch is really, really much faster. Now I'm going to click on Zen mode or full screen mode to give my screen a little bit more expansion there so I can see as many things as possible. The other thing you'll notice is that when you scroll up and down, and it kind of finicky, works a little bit, you scroll up and down, this header stands still. There's only a little bit of a glitch, so when you scroll all the way down, then you lose it. So that's something that they kind of have to fix. But for the most part, in the majority of the scrolling, especially when you scroll with your mouse, this header stays fixed. They just got to figure out a way for the header to stay fixed there. So then when you're scrolling all the way down, it doesn't kind of lose itself as it shows the bottom. So that's one little thing that they still need to fix, but it's getting a lot more better in responsiveness and overall user interface. Now, another thing that's interesting is if I make this screen smaller, and I'm just going to kind of make this smaller and smaller and smaller, they've built something into the logic of this where this actions column, this column here in the actions part, stays fixed, right? So no matter what you do, that stays fixed. That's particularly important. And I kind of started by saying I was going to update you on all the new things that RightTool has, is because when I use the RightTool bar to open and expand, so this is whether you use an extension or any sidebar tools available in your browser, or make the browser smaller or bigger, especially when you're making it thinner or less wide, so to speak, that it keeps this action column stable. So I like that very much. I think that's a great update. Another thing that's pretty neat here, when you click on this little baby gear, it's the settings button, is that all of these columns are fully customizable. So I can actually uncheck any of the things that I don't want to see. Now there's a couple of these that are fixed that you can't uncheck. So the date is going to be there no matter what. Bank description is going to be there no matter what. Spend and received, assuming that you use dual mode, because if you don't want to have two separate columns, you can uncheck show amount sent, spend and received, and you can have a single column that shows negative or positive, which is really my preferred choice. But bottom line is that one cannot be removed. Match, categorize, and action. So those are fixed. So what you could do is you could organize them in a very clean way so you get them in the exact order that you want. So I'm just kind of moving these around. So these are the ones that are forced into it. Again, these are the ones that I cannot turn off and on, which are these five. And then action is always at the very end, as we mentioned earlier, because that's its fixed position. But then I can choose what do I want to bring. So I want to bring to and from, so I can enter the payee name. Then I want to bring, let's say, customer job, because I have a construction company or a project-based company and I want to do that. I want to bring in class. So I get to choose that, but I also get to choose in what order. So let's say I want to put the customer first and the to from second and then class third. And then I get to basically choose that experience. So every business, and this is something that's so true that I've experienced with doing consulting work with other small businesses, is every business, every person has their own way their brain works, their own way they process logic, and their own way in which works best for them to look at this information in order. Like some people may want to see that dollar amount all the way at the end, right? Because for whatever reason, that's how they think. They want to look at the dollar amount all the way at the end. This date is probably the first thing that people look at, but maybe it works the other way. Maybe people want to see the dollar amount itself at the very beginning, and then maybe the date at the end, or the date could be right before the vendor or something like that. So this specific workflow of how you want to see the information, so then you can decide, how you're going to categorize it and what customer job it belongs to, and what vendor is related to, and what class or location is related to it. Like, so this is all going to be fully customizable based on how you think and based on how your workflows would work when you're doing your categorization. Another enhancement I like is here in that baby gear in the settings button. If I scroll down, one of the options says warn if missing customer or vendor. So this is actually really, really valuable. So I'm actually going to just leave it unchecked so I can show you. So for example, let's say I have a specific transaction here and I don't have a customer. I'm just going to delete here, and I don't have a vendor information. So I just have the account category and I'm skipping customer and vendor, right? So if I click on post, it lets me do it no problem. Now, if I click on the gear button and then turn that on, so check that on, and I gear out of it, and then I go look at another transaction and I do categorize it, but then I forget to put a vendor name here, and I go to post, it gives me a warning saying, hey, are you sure you want to post without a vendor? So I actually really like this because the user may not notice the importance of having to add a vendor, but I know for a fact that when running reports later on, having that vendor name in there is extremely powerful. So you actually can cancel or post anyway. So you can still overwrite. Okay, so it's just basically a bit of a nuance that it reminds the person that you're missing that payee information in the from and to column. Now the cool thing is, with their built-in AI, you can click on this little button here that's like kind of like the little stars, the gems, and it says, hey, I'm gonna go ahead and create a vendor for you just called Costco, and then it picks that vendor for you. So that's the really interesting thing about it, is that you can use that workflow, and if the vendor doesn't exist, just click on add to vendor list, and it quickly creates the vendor for you on the fly. So there really isn't an excuse not to create those vendors, especially when it does that extra job at working you to the workflow of creating the vendor name. If it doesn't have the little star there, if you click on the drop-down menu, then you would just click on add, and that's it. It will start blank. But when you see the little gems there for artificial intelligence, that means it's going to take you to the workflow of automatically adding those names for you. So when you're creating the vendors, it's a much faster process. Now, these two are kind of oldies but goodies, but worth mentioning. Some people get kind of annoyed at this match categorize buttons. They just seem to take a lot of real estate. They do have a reason for them to be there, right? Because if I click on match, it takes me into the match screen. And if I have a transaction that's set up as a pair and I click on categorize, it removes the pairing and allows me to categorize it like normal. So those buttons are practical, but if you want to remove them, just click on that gear menu again and go down and click on where it says show match categorize toggle inline. You can easily just turn that off. Then you don't see those buttons, and then you can always bring them back. And then the other oldie but goodie is this alternate row color. So I started with this white gray setup, because if you don't click on that, then you go in the old mode, which is just white background, which again, some people might like this, but I find it just much easier to use alternate color. I just find it just a lot easier to read, a lot easier to follow. And as I mentioned earlier, for example, let's say QuickBooks suggests a pairing. That's when it looks at one transaction on one side and a transaction on the other side. And it says, well, they must be matching together. Therefore, I'll create a transfer between them. This is not a match. This is a pairing, which is going to prompt the creation of a transfer. But if it's not right, like for example, this one supposed to be a transfer to checking 9999, and then it's saying that this matches with MasterCard payable. That one of the problems that you have is whenever you have a pairing and you click on the drop-down menu, you don't have a full choice of options that you have. You have, for some reason, one particular expense account and then only credit card accounts. So it kind of acts a little weird when it goes into pairing mode. So the only way to clean up or clear that pairing mode is to turn on the feature again for the inline match and categorize. And this is kind of a hidden trick. Then I have to click on the button categorize, and it kind of dissolves that pairing mode. And then when I click on the drop-down menu, then I have full access to the chart of accounts. So just like a little tiny nuance, but it's important to point it out. Another neat little feature is the attachments. So I'm going to click on that baby gear again, right? That little settings button on top of my transactions table. And I'm going to go down and I'm going to click on this option called Files Feature. I don't know why it's called feature. I'm not sure what that means, but we're going to do a Files Feature. And then what that will do is it will add a new column with this attachments icon, right? With the paperclip that allows me to quickly on the fly, click on the plus icon, select any file on my computer, click on open, and it will attach that file for me. There's other ways to attach by clicking on the transaction to expand it, and then clicking right here where it says upload, and then attaching from there. So you can do it manually by opening each transaction, clicking on upload, or you can click on the plus button to attachments. Another thing I really like is if you're a drag and drop person like I am. So let's say, for example, I got a folder with a bunch of receipts, and then I'm going to grab every one of these receipts and sort of match them up to these transactions. So all I would have to do is grab the receipt, drag and drop, and as long as my mouse falls into one of these lines here, you have this little indicator in the bottom kind of telling you which transaction is going to be dropped into, which is really cool. That little preview kind of letting you know, yeah, you're on the right one. Then you let go of the mouse, and it does the same thing as clicking on the plus button and uploading the transaction. So that drag and drop feature is fantastic. So those are all the new things that you should see in the new banking screen in QuickBooks, built in when you first log into your QuickBooks. No need for any additional add-ons or anything like that. But I want to talk about RightTool, which is a Chrome extension that you install into your browser, and it enhances the QuickBooks experience in so many ways. But I want to focus just on the banking side, just so you can see the interconnection of how these additional features work within your banking workflow. Now, I don't want to toot my own horn here, but a lot of these things that they have added in QuickBooks have been semi-inspired by things that we have been experimenting in RightTool and videos I have posted telling Intuit you should do this, you should do that, and multiple consulting sessions where I give them some feedback. So I want to congratulate them on taking the initiative and doing the things that matter to users, particularly on this performance increase. But I myself, via my work with RightTool, I want to continue to innovate and make this screen even better. So I'm going to open up my RightTool, and then I'm going to click on my settings button, and then I'm going to turn on all the features inside this grouping here called Bank Feeds Pro. So everything that you see here are additional features that we've added to bank feeds. I'm just going to turn them all on, and I'll try to show you as many as possible within a single demo. And then also under error prevention, we have a couple of ones. One is called More Details in Bank Feeds. So I'm going to click on that. And then I'm also going to go into a new transactions button in banking reconciliation, turn that on. And I'm also going to turn on search with Perplexity and Google Memo, because those are all useful features. Now, this grouping here, the ones under error prevention, these are part of the free version of RightTool. And then everything that's in Bank Feeds Pro are part of the paid edition of RightTool, because we do have a freemium model. So you download it, you immediately get some features. But then once you pay the membership fee, you get access to all the additional features. So I'm going to start by kind of pointing out all the things that are on the screen that look and feel different. So I'm going to collapse that left piece here. And there's two areas to look at. One is called Last Reconciled Not Found, and the other one is Plus Expense. So basically, the Plus Expense just allows me to quickly create a new transaction that opens up in a new tab automatically. It's also smart enough to know which bank account you're in. So if you go create a check or a deposit or whatever, it will use the same exact bank account that you were in originally in order to kind of make that workflow a little bit quicker. So that's something that only works when you add it in RightTool. Now, this thing here that says last reconciled not found, this will tell you the last time that this bank was reconciled. So this one has never been reconciled, but if I go and finish a reconciliation, so let me go through the workflow of reconciling this bank account here. So let me just do this real quick. So imagine, I went into my bank statement and I made sure that all the transactions matched, and then I clicked on finish now, and I finished the whole reconciliation workflow. Now that QuickBooks officially has this bank account reconciled, and it's reconciled as of 12/31/2025, which you can always find that information by going into the reconcile screen. The problem is that when I go back into banking, so let me go back into the banking screen, is that information is nowhere to be found. So via a RightTool, so it says right there, last reconciled 12/31. And then if I click on that, that's a hyperlink that opens up a new tab and then takes me to the reconciliation page. So from here, I can pull a reconciliation report or whatever. It's just so I can see exactly where I was. So it's actually very, very useful to just quickly know while I'm looking at this bank account, whether or not this bank account has been reconciled and as of when. So you will notice that some payees, for example, the actual information that came from the bank was Costco, WHSE, like Costco warehouse, but QuickBooks cleans that up and gives you like their own cleaned up version. This one says Verizon Wireless PMT, but it cleaned it up to Verizon Wireless. This one says FedEx Office 0932, which is probably the location number, and it changed it to Federal Express. So QuickBooks does this quirky thing where they'll clean up the vendor payee for you, which is a very useful thing. But sometimes I want to see both the cleanup version and the actual original information, because maybe there may be some information here, like trip to London or whatever, which QuickBooks is cleaning up for you, and I may want to see that information because it might be relevant for the categorization of transactions. Another feature worth looking at is on any transaction that I open to explore. So let's say I click on this QuickBooks transaction for $85 and I open to explore. Let's say, for example, I'm not 100% sure how to categorize this. Like this one, QuickBooks suggested accounting fees, which might or might not be right? I mean, it doesn't matter. But then what you can do is you can click on Google Memo or Perplexity, and it will search this description in Google or Perplexity and give you that answer. So let me pick one that maybe is a little bit more obscure. Let's say we choose this Adobe Creative Cloud. I'll click on that. Right now it's suggesting office equipment, which again, might be right or might be wrong. And then I can just click on Google Memo, and it'll open up a new tab, a pop-up, and it will search that same string in Google for you. I know a lot of people already do that, like they manually go into Google and they search those things. So it's just saving you that step of having to copy and paste, and then maybe by looking at it, you will research and know what it is. If you click on Perplexity, it will open up a Perplexity AI search, and it will search this for you, right? And this Perplexity will do a little bit better at sort of giving you a more nuanced answer potentially. So then you can use this context to figure out how to categorize the transaction. Another feature that I love, which I believe QuickBooks drew some inspiration from, is, for example, I may be having transactions in which it doesn't suggest a vendor to create. For whatever reason, the AI didn't pick it up, or it wasn't sure how to do it. But for years, we've been creating our own vendor or payees. So if we click on the transaction itself, and then we have this two little buttons. One says V and the other one says C. V means vendor, C means customer. So I want to add this vendor into my vendor list. I don't want to go into to from, click on add new, copy and paste or type stuff. That just takes too long. So basically what you do is you just click on that little V there, and it automatically, when you hit OK, it goes in and it creates the vendor for you automatically. Like I wasn't clicking on anything. It just did it for me automatically. So that's pretty neat. But if you don't want it to create a vendor with the entire name, including the phone number, because that's maybe not that practical, we can look at, let's say, another one. Let's look at this enterprise rental car, and I can just pick the information that I want to be the official data that gets created with the vendor. So I just selected this piece, omitted everything else. I selected this piece, click, go back here, click on the V, and then click OK. And then it goes through the process of creating the vendor only with that limited information. By the way, it's worth noting that this partial selection also works for the Google Memo feature. So if I only select that and click on Google Memo, it will search just that piece that I searched. So sometimes we're reading a big string of data and the relevant data could be all the way to the end. It could be at the beginning, could be somewhere in the middle. And we don't want to Google every single piece of data that's there because it'll confuse the search or confuse the AI if you use Perplexity. So you get to pick specifically what string you want to search. Another one you might like is, let's say, for example, I'm creating this transaction and I go in my drop-down menu and I pick the particular payee. Once you select a payee, a little tiny button here that says Payee History can actually pop up and open up a new tab and create a report of every transaction in the past that you have ever had with that payee. In this case, there hasn't been any, but maybe we'll pick one that might have some. So let me select a different one. And then I'll click on Payee History here. And I'll open up a new tab and then show me the payee history of that particular vendor that I chose. And you're going to see every transaction related to that, including the transaction type, the account that was used, the source account, the dollar amount, class, location, customer, by default, all dates. Now, to be fair, QuickBooks does have this button called Categorization History that is very useful. And actually, I won't knock it. Actually, I use it all the time. Only challenge I have with this is that just the interface itself is kind of a little bit quirky. I do like the fact that you can click on assign category. That's absolutely useful. But sometimes I may want to have a broader view. I want to see more transactions, more data in the transactions. And that's how the report itself, it's a little bit more useful. Now, there are some really interesting settings here that you can change and customize. So I'm going to go back into RightTool here. And under Bank Feeds Pro, I'm going to change this payee history. So instead of opening up a report, it opens up the vendor details page, which is a different interface, it's a different point of view, so to speak. So I'm going to go back into bank transactions and I'll refresh the screen. We'll go back into bank transactions and I'll click the same process, the payee history, but now you're going to see how it behaves slightly different. So let me change the payee here. Where is it? Let's put here Adobe. And instead of going to a report, when I click on Payee History there in the bottom, it's going to go to my vendor detail screen. Now, why would I want to go to the vendor's detail screen? Well, maybe I want to edit the vendor name, something that I find myself doing a lot, where I'm going through categorizing stuff and I realize that I have redundant vendors, or I have vendors that are named incorrectly, or maybe the history screen here is more useful than the report screen. And here, when I click on the drop-down menu, I can merge my contacts from here quickly. So sometimes I'll realize that I have two of the same, and then I want to just go in here and merge my contacts quickly because maybe I have two vendors that are redundant or whatever, and then I want to merge those in so I only have one of the two. So next time I come here and I refresh and click on the drop-down menu, whatever vendors were merged will not only show that one. So again, it's just quick shortcuts to getting to different places a little bit quicker. Now, the last thing I'll show you is the rule creation workflow. So let me go back and just turn that off for a second. So that requires us to kind of go backwards for a second and kind of explain how rules get created in QuickBooks Online. So I'm going to just kind of close all these things. And then I'm going to create a rule from this page just so you can see the standard rule creation workflow. Let me make the screen bigger here. So let's say I open up here, this one that says Costco, and then I go down here to where it says create rule. Again, this is a standard QuickBooks feature. QuickBooks by default grabs the cleaned up payee name. So not the full string that came from the bank, but the cleaned up payee name. So that could be a challenge. It puts it in there. It automatically chooses the source account that you're paying from, which is fine, but sometimes I may want this to be all bank accounts. And it leaves the name of the rule blank. So I have to come in here and put Costco. So just a lot of extra kind of steps. The other thing that when I scroll down that drives me flipping crazy is the fact that the rule itself by default creates the memo to replace the memo of the new transaction with the old transaction. So if you create rules without noticing this, it's going to be a hot mess. So you have to go back in there and delete that information in order for that to be relevant. So notice how many steps I'm taking to create a rule. It's just way too many steps. So I'm going to show you what we've done in RightTool with the improved rule creation workflow. So for example, we can default the auto add if you wanted. We don't want the auto add to be on. Okay, so QuickBooks actually fixed that problem a long time ago, so you don't have to turn that on. You can disable the auto add so the user don't even have the option to create an auto add rule. You can force the user to have a payee in the rule so you don't inadvertently save the rule without a payee name. You can default the rules to match to bank text and not to the cleaned up text, or what they're calling description, because I want the actual raw data that came from the bank to be part of the bank rule. I can click on do not add memo to the rule, which is really important, right? To clear up that memo information. I can default to all bank accounts. And I can also automatically add the bank description as the name of the rule. So like all these things, and again, you can pick and choose which workflow you want to use, but this is the one that, for example, I want to use. So I'm going to show you now when I create a bank rule, how different it is and how many, most importantly, how many clicks it saves me, okay? So let's just maximize the screen here. Let's open up this Costco and let's go into create rule. Now you will notice that the name that came from the description gets automatically written in here. You know, maybe it wasn't perfect, but I could just go in there and delete a piece, which is easier. Notice that all bank accounts was chosen automatically, so I don't have to go in there and click that. Here's my original bank text that came in. And again, I can remove some of this stuff or leave it depending on its relevance. It went in, and if I click here, it cleared out my replace of the memo, which is really, really awesome. And I almost forgot one of these kind of sleeper features. So whenever you're in banking and you're selecting multiple transactions, and some of the transactions contain positives and others contain negatives, sometimes accountants have given us the feedback that we want to know what is the net amount of the group of transactions that we're selecting, because we might be selecting a group of transactions that are supposed to add up to a different group of transactions. Maybe we're trying to match it up with a bunch of payments and a credit card fee or something like that. So right here in the bottom, you see it says net match amount. Basically, it does the math for you, how many are money in and how many are money out. So real quick, you can check or reconcile that with whatever other number you're looking at, because you're categorizing a bunch of transactions at the same time. And that's it. RightTool has so many other features. We have over 100 features. I only showed you like 20 of them. And so I'm hoping that you try it out. There's a free version. I'll put the link in the description. And on the QuickBooks side, I'm hoping you liked all these enhancements. I'm super excited about it. Kudos to the QuickBooks team for just really enhancing the banking experience, which is where I spend 80% of my time with my client work. Hope you enjoyed this video. See you in the next one.